I think one of the major issues is access to treatment. Where do you go for treatment? Where do you get treated? Who pays for it? We know that there are lots of social factors which cause mental illness, and once you've developed mental illness, there are lots of sequelae of mental illness. For example, people who have mental illness quite often lose their jobs. They may have to move house. They may lose families. What we need to bear in mind is that human beings are social animals, and by developing a psychiatric disorder, quite often they get rejected by the family, by society as a whole, and it affects their self-esteem and social functioning. The major issue for patients with any illness, whether it is psychiatric or physical illness, is that you want to have a reasonable standard of living, you want to have a job, you want to be busy, you want to have a house, you need to have a set of friends, you need to have a family. But one of the big challenges for psychiatric patients really is the stigma which prevents them from engaging with and re-engaging with the society. I don't think there's any country in the world where it is perfect. Each country has its own challenges, and challenges depend upon money being invested. I mean, one of the major issues in India, for example, is my understanding is that less than 1% of GDP is spent on health, of which less than 10% is spent on mental health, if that. Whereas in other countries like America, for example, 21% of GDP is spent on health. In UK and large parts of Europe, it's between 8 and 10%. So it is a question about resources, and it is also about where the money is spent in terms of mental health, whether it is spent on asylums, in hospitals, or whether it is spent in the community, or whether it is spent on public mental health and teaching people how to look after themselves better. Like in any other society, India faces its own challenges, particularly related to it's a culture in transition, that the traditional models of family are changing. More and more people are moving into urban areas. Key stakeholders in managing, and everyone is a stakeholder. If we look at the patient at the center of the need and the treatment, they're surrounded by their family and kinship, who are the key stakeholders, because they want their loved ones to be better, to function independently, to look after their families. And then that's surrounded by larger society, which is represented by politicians, by policymakers, by professionals, by leaders, whether they are community leaders, whether they're religious leaders, whether they're teachers. So there's a whole group. And it is worth bearing in mind that health, and particularly mental health, is everyone's business. One of the major challenges for psychiatrists is that we have to advocate for our patients. By and large, psychiatric patients do not have a voice. So they need people to stand up for them and say, this is what is needed. And one of the ways that psychiatrists can do this is by talking to politicians, by talking to other professionals, that patients need right intervention at the right time, at the right level. We know that if you have diabetes and you develop depression, both your diabetes and depression will get worse. We know that if you have high blood pressure and depression, your high blood pressure will be difficult to control. So the physicians and the surgeons need to know what they need to do to identify depression and work with psychiatrists in treating depression and other psychiatric disorders.